Before the first rooster crowed, before dawn painted its soft gray light across the hills, Mama Rose was already awake. The small hut she called home was silent except for the faint breathing of her grandchildren sleeping on a thin mat in the corner. The air was cold, the kind of chill that sank into old bones, but Mama Rose had long stopped complaining about the cold. Life had taught her that cold was a companion, sometimes cruel, sometimes kind, but always there. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake the little ones. Her knees cracked like old wood as she reached for the faded kitang cloth folded neatly by her side. The fabric had once been bright orange with flowers, but years of washing and sun had turned it pale and soft, almost gray. She tied it tightly around her waist, then reached for the woven basket resting against the wall. The basket was large, handmade from palm reeds, patched and repatched over the years. To anyone else, it was just a basket. To Mama Rose, it was the heart of her survival. She brushed the dust off its rim and whispered softly, "We have work to do, old friend." She always spoke to it as if it could understand because in some way, it did. That basket had carried more than vegetables, it had carried dreams, burdens, prayers, and tears. Outside, the world was still asleep. The moon hung low, faint against the early light. She lit a small kerosene lamp and stepped out, her bare feet meeting the cool earth. The path leading to her garden wound through tall grass and small stones, each one familiar beneath her feet. She'd walked this same path for nearly 20 years. Her husband had once walked beside her, long before sickness took him away. Then her daughter, before life broke her spirit. Now it was only Mama Rose and the weight of generations she could never put down. At the edge of the field, the morning fog clung to the earth. Her garden was small but full: tomatoes, kale, onions, cassava. Each plant was a child she had raised from seed. She crouched down, pulling weeds and checking for pests. The soil was dry, so she fetched water from a nearby stream, her back bent under the gourd's weight. She poured it gently over the roots, whispering, "Grow strong for me. We still have mouths to feed." As she worked, she thought of her 3 grandchildren: Amina, 12, Joseph, 9, and the baby, little Rose, barely 2 years old. Their mother, her daughter Miriam, had been gone for 2 years now. Childbirth had taken her life, just as it had taken Mama Rose's mother decades before. It was a cruel cycle, one that seemed to haunt the women of her family. But Mama Rose had sworn that it would end with her. She would carry whatever she must, for as long as she could. By the time the sun began to rise, her basket was half full. The light spilled across the land in gold and amber, brushing against her weathered face. She stood for a moment, looking at the sky, her eyes reflecting years of exhaustion and gratitude. The rooster crowed again late, as if embarrassed, and Mama Rose laughed softly. "You're always late, just like your master," she said, thinking of her neighbor who overslept every day. When the harvest was ready, she arranged the vegetables carefully in her basket: tomatoes at the bottom, leafy greens on top. Then she bent her knees, gripped the thick rope tied around the basket, and hoisted it onto her back. The familiar strain spread through her shoulders, her spine, her hips. It was a pain she'd known for so long it had become part of her body. But she stood tall, adjusting the weight until it balanced perfectly. The walk to the market was long: 3 miles through dusty roads and uneven paths. The basket swayed with every step, bumping softly against her back. Sometimes she stopped to rest under a tree, her breath coming out in slow, steady puffs. She would close her eyes and think of Miriam's voice, soft and musical, singing lullabies while shelling peas. Then she'd picture her grandchildren laughing around the fire at night, asking her to tell stories of when the world was young. Those memories gave her strength. When she finally reached the market, the stalls were already alive with chatter and color. Women called out to buyers, vendors argued over prices, and children weaved between legs carrying small bundles of fruit. Mama Rose found her usual spot, a shaded corner near the well, and spread a piece of cloth on the ground. She arranged her vegetables neatly, each tomato shining in the light. "Ah, Mama Rose, you're early again," said Fatuma, a fellow vendor with a wide smile. "Early birds catch the blessings," Mama Rose replied with a grin. As the morning passed, customers came and went. Some bargained, others paid with gratitude. Every coin that fell into her palm was a small victory. By noon, her basket was nearly empty. She sat down to rest, sipping water from a tin cup, her thoughts drifting again to the children. Would Amina remember to warm the porridge? Would Joseph fetch firewood? Would the baby still be sleeping when she returned? By evening, the market began to quiet. She gathered her earnings just enough to buy a little rice, a bit of sugar, and soap. As she lifted the empty basket once more, she smiled faintly. The weight was gone, but her back still ached, as if the memory of it remained. On the way home, the sky turned crimson and violet. She walked slower now, the wind cool against her skin. Every step, every breath, every ache was a prayer. And as the sun disappeared behind the hills, Mama Rose whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, we do it again." The night fell quiet over the village, the kind of stillness that comes only after a long day of work and weary souls returning home. A soft wind brushed against the thatched roof of Mama Rose's hut, making it creak gently like an old lullaby. Inside, the small room glowed faintly from a flickering kerosene lamp. The children were huddled together on their mat, fast asleep, their small bodies tangled like vines, safe, for now. Mama Rose sat by the fire, stirring a pot of porridge. The flames cast shadows across her face, highlighting every line carved by time and hardship. Beside her, a small wooden jar sat half hidden under a folded cloth. She reached for it, tapped the lid, and smiled faintly. The jar was heavy with coins, her future fund, as she called it. Every shilling she earned that wasn't immediately needed for food or medicine went into that jar. It wasn't much, but it was something. She poured the porridge into 3 cups and set them near the children. The youngest, little Rose, stirred and mumbled in her sleep. Her lips formed the word mama, though her mother had been gone since she was barely a week old. Mama Rose felt her chest tighten as she gently covered the child with a blanket. "Sleep, my angel," she whispered. "Your mama is watching from the stars." She turned back to the jar and stared at it for a long while. It was made of old wood, with a faint crack running along the side. It had belonged to her daughter, Miriam. She used to keep dried beans in it when she was still alive. After the funeral, Mama Rose couldn't bring herself to throw it away. Instead, she had turned it into a vessel of hope, a promise that one day, her grandchildren would know a different life. She remembered that day vividly, the day Miriam died. The screams, the rushing, the desperate prayers whispered into the air that refused to answer. Miriam had been in labor for 2 days. The nearest clinic was 12 miles away, and the midwife had come too late. Mama Rose still heard her daughter's last words echo in her mind, "Mama, take care of them, please." She had promised. Not with words, but with every breath she took afterward. That night, as the wind howled softly outside, Mama Rose knelt beside the small fire and spoke to the darkness. "God," she began, "I don't ask for riches or rest. Just strength. Strength to wake up tomorrow and carry this basket again. Strength to keep my promise to her." She waited, but of course, there was no reply, just the crackle of burning wood and the quiet breathing of the children. Still, she smiled. Silence was an answer too. It meant she had to keep going. The next morning came too soon. Before the sky turned pale, Mama Rose was already up. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache, but she ignored it. She washed her face with cold water, tied her cloth again, and prepared for another trip to the garden. Amina, the eldest grandchild, woke and rubbed her sleepy eyes. "Grandma, can I come today?" she asked eagerly. Mama Rose smiled. "You'll stay and watch your brother and sister. That's your work for now. But one day, you'll come. You'll learn how to make the earth feed us." Amina nodded, a little disappointed but proud all the same. "One day," she repeated softly. Mama Rose placed her calloused hand on the girl's head. "One day," she agreed. Outside, the air was heavy with dew. Her basket, though old and fraying, waited by the doorway like a loyal companion. She lifted it, wincing as her spine protested. "Ah," she sighed. "You and I are getting too old for this, aren't we?" The basket, of course, said nothing. But the weight on her back felt like an answer. As she walked, she thought of the promise again of what it really meant. It wasn't just about feeding them. It was about dignity. About ensuring they went to school, wore clean clothes, slept without fear. She wanted them to believe the world could be kind. That it wasn't always dust and hunger and loss. At the garden, she worked faster than usual. The sun climbed high, and sweat rolled down her temples. Every tomato she picked, every leaf she cleaned, was a small piece of that promise being built. When she was done, she wiped her brow, looked at the sky, and whispered, "We're getting closer, Miriam. I can feel it." That evening, after selling her vegetables, Mama Rose returned with a small packet of sugar and a piece of fabric she had bought from a passing trader. It wasn't new or fancy, but it was clean and bright yellow, something cheerful for Amina, who had outgrown her old dress. When she handed it to the girl, Amina gasped. "For me?" Mama Rose nodded. "You'll wear it on Sunday. You must look like the future you're walking toward." The child's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her grandmother. "I'll make you proud, Grandma," she said softly. "You already do," Mama Rose replied. That night, after everyone had fallen asleep, she took out the wooden jar again. She dropped in the few coins she had earned that day and listened to the soft clinking sound. It was the most beautiful sound she knew, like rain on a dry roof. Her eyes lingered on the jar. "One day," she whispered, "they'll go to school. They'll leave this place. They'll remember you, Miriam. And they'll remember me, the old woman who carried them on her back." She smiled, blew out the lamp, and lay down beside the children. The stars outside were faint, but steady. Somewhere among them, she believed, her daughter was watching, proud, at peace. And with that thought, Mama Rose drifted into a sleep as deep as mercy. The dry season came early that year. The rain stopped without warning, leaving the fields cracked and thirsty. The earth, once rich and soft beneath Mama Rose's feet, had turned brittle, like old pottery. Each step raised a puff of dust that clung to her ankles. The sun, merciless and unrelenting, seemed to sit lower in the sky, burning hotter each day. But still, Mama Rose rose before dawn. She couldn't afford to rest. The jar under her bed was still too light, too hollow. School fees were due in 2 weeks, and she refused to let Amina miss another term. "She will finish school," Mama Rose told herself every morning as she tied her headscarf and lifted her basket. "Even if it breaks me." That phrase, "even if it breaks me," would come to define everything that followed. The mornings had become longer, heavier. Her joints screamed with every movement, her breath came shorter than before. Yet she worked. She fetched water from the stream, her feet sinking into mud, her arms trembling as she carried the gourd back to the garden. She weeded, harvested, tied bundles of kale, and gathered the few tomatoes that had survived the heat. At times, she paused to steady herself, resting her hands on her knees as her vision blurred. The edges of the world seemed to fade in and out, but she would blink hard and force her body to keep moving. "You can't stop now," she would whisper to herself. "You stop, they suffer." By the time she reached the market, her clothes were soaked with sweat. The other women noticed her struggle. Mama Rose, You must rest, Fatuma said one morning, shaking her head. You push yourself too hard. These young ones, they must help you more. Mama Rose smiled, though her lips trembled. Their help will come. For now, I still have strength left. Fatuma frowned. Strength is like morning dew, it disappears before you realize it's gone. Mama Rose laughed softly. Then I must rise before it does. That afternoon, the heat grew unbearable. The market stalls shimmered in the sunlight, the smell of dust and sweat thick in the air. Customers were few, no one wanted to walk under such sun. Mama Rose sat in the corner of her stall, fanning herself with a folded piece of cardboard. The world swayed slightly, as if she were standing on water. Her head felt light, her arms heavy. But she ignored it. A young boy approached, clutching a coin. Grandma, how much for the tomatoes? 2 for 1, she said, though her voice came out hoarse. He handed her the coin, took the tomatoes, and left. She didn't notice that she'd dropped the money beside her. Her eyes were on the ground, unfocused, as her body began to tilt forward. The world dimmed. The noise of the market faded until it was just a dull hum. Then nothing. When she opened her eyes, she was lying by the roadside. Someone had placed her basket beside her. Her head throbbed, and her back felt as though a stone had been placed on it. Around her, a few women murmured softly. She fainted in the heat, one said. She hasn't eaten since morning, another whispered. Mama Rose blinked slowly, struggling to sit up. I'm fine, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Just tired, that's all. Fatuma crouched beside her, worry clouding her eyes. You need to rest, Mama Rose. You've given enough. But Mama Rose shook her head, the motion small but firm. If I stop, who will feed them? Who will pay for school? She turned to look at her basket. It had rolled to the edge of the road, spilling its contents. Tomatoes, dirt-streaked and bruised, lay scattered like fallen hearts. She reached out weakly. Did the basket break? She asked. Fatuma looked at her, tears in her eyes. No, Mama Rose. It didn't. A faint smile touched the old woman's lips. Good, she whispered. Then we're still okay. They helped her sit under a tree. Someone brought her water. She drank slowly, each sip trembling in her hands. The air felt thick and heavy, pressing against her chest. She looked at the horizon, the long, dusty road back home. It had never seemed so far. When she finally stood, her legs felt like reeds in the wind. She picked up her basket again, brushed the dirt from its side, and balanced it on her back. Every muscle in her body screamed for mercy, but she kept walking. One slow step after another, her feet dragging through the dust. Along the way, she hummed a tune her daughter used to sing. It was faint and broken, but it gave her rhythm, something to keep her going. Her vision blurred again, but she didn't stop. Home was waiting. Her grandchildren were waiting. That was reason enough. By the time she reached the hut, the sun was gone and the sky burned with the colors of dusk: orange, pink, purple. Amina ran out first, followed by Joseph. Grandma, they cried, rushing to her side. I'm fine, she said softly, forcing a smile. Just a little tired today. Amina frowned. You should rest. You work too hard. Mama Rose placed her hand on the girl's cheek. I will, my child. Soon. But not yet. That night, after everyone was asleep, she sat on the floor beside the jar. She opened it, counted the coins slowly, and sighed. Still not enough. But she smiled anyway. We're almost there, she whispered into the darkness. Her hands trembled as she tightened the lid. Her back ached so badly she could barely straighten it, yet her heart was full. Because she had not given up. because the basket had not broken. And for Mama Rose, that was enough for now. The rain finally came. It arrived one morning without warning, heavy, thunderous, and wild. The sound filled the valley, bouncing off the hills, flooding the parched ground that had long begged for mercy. For the first time in months, the air smelled of new life. The garden drank deeply, and the dust that had clung to the earth washed away. But inside the small hut at the edge of the village, the sound of rain meant something else entirely. Mama Rose was lying on her mat, her breath shallow, her eyes half open. Her body, once strong and unyielding, now looked fragile beneath the blanket. The same back that had carried baskets, burdens, and generations was no longer able to rise. Amina sat beside her, holding a damp cloth against her forehead. "The fever's gone down a little," she whispered to Joseph, who stood near the doorway. "She needs a doctor," he said, his voice trembling. "I'll run to the market, maybe someone can help." But Mama Rose stirred slightly, shaking her head. "No, stay," she murmured. "Don't leave me now." Her voice was barely a breath, yet it carried the same strength that had once guided them through hunger and drought. Amina's eyes filled with tears. "You'll get better, Grandma. You just need to rest." Mama Rose smiled faintly. "Ah, my child. I have been resting in small pieces all my life. She paused, exhaling slowly, "this is just the last one." For the next few days, the rain continued. Neighbors came to visit, bringing herbs, porridge, and prayers. The children took turns tending the fire, keeping the room warm and lit. Despite her pain, Mama Rose still asked about the garden. "Did the rain reach the tomatoes?" she asked weakly. "Yes," Joseph said. "They look strong again." Her smile deepened. "Good. The earth remembers kindness." On the third evening, she called for Amina. The girl sat close, tears already forming before a word was spoken. "Listen to me, my child," Mama Rose whispered. "The world will not always be kind. But it will always be turning. You must learn to turn with it." Amina nodded, biting her lip. "You will grow strong," her grandmother continued, "not because life is easy, but because you are loved. You carry my hands in yours, my strength in your heart. And when the world feels too heavy, remember the basket." Amina looked toward the corner of the room, where the old woven basket leaned against the wall. Its reeds were frayed, the handles worn smooth by years of use. "I'll never throw it away," she said softly. Mama Rose chuckled weakly. "No, don't throw it away. But don't carry it either. Build something new to fill instead." That night, the rain stopped. The air felt strangely still, as if the world were holding its breath. Mama Rose drifted in and out of sleep, her breathing slow and even. In her dreams, she walked through her garden under golden sunlight. The earth was soft, and her basket was light. She could hear laughter, Miriam's voice, calling her home. When dawn came, the children found her lying peacefully, her hands folded across her chest, her face calm and radiant. The morning light fell gently over her, as if the sun itself was saying goodbye. The village mourned her deeply. Women came to wash and dress her, singing the old songs of farewell. Men built a simple wooden coffin, and the children placed flowers inside bright yellow ones from the garden she loved most. As they laid her to rest beneath the mango tree behind her house, Amina placed the old basket beside her. It was empty now, but it felt full of stories, of memories, of everything Mama Rose had carried that no one else could see. "She carried generations on her back," Amina whispered. "Now we carry her in our hearts." Years passed. The children grew. Amina became a teacher, just as her grandmother had dreamed. Joseph studied mechanics in the city, and little Rose, no longer so little, became a nurse. The three of them never forgot where they came from or who made their future possible. With time, They saved enough money to build a small school in their village. They named it the Rose Foundation Academy, in honor of the woman who had planted seeds of education long before there were books or desks. At the entrance stood a glass case. Inside it sat Mama Rose's old basket, carefully cleaned but still showing every scar, every fray, every mark of her labor. Beneath it, a plaque read. This basket carried more than food. It carried generations. The woman who bore it gave us tomorrow. Every morning, children passed it as they entered their classrooms. Some would stop and stare, curious about the story behind it. And Amina, now headmistress Amina Rose Mwanji, would smile and tell them, that basket belonged to my grandmother. She taught me that love can carry more weight than the body ever could. Sometimes, after the last bell rang, Amina would sit alone on the school steps and watch the sunset paint the sky in deep oranges and purples, Mama Rose's favorite colors. She would close her eyes, feeling the warmth on her face, and whisper, "We did it, Grandma. You can rest now." The wind would rise then, soft and familiar, brushing past her cheek like a loving hand. And in that quiet, she could almost hear her grandmother's voice, steady, kind, and full of grace, saying, "I never stopped believing in you."